And I want you to just maybe spend some time after you listen to this podcast, or maybe as you're listening to it, and ask yourself an honest question, like, is there anything that I'm still doing that I maybe shouldn't still be doing because I'm afraid to dream it up again? The success I've had, the notoriety I've gained, what people think of me, the things I've accomplished, the sense of security that doing the same thing all the time has given me, has kept me from growing, has kept me from whatever breakthrough that I may need to step into, and maybe step into that God is actually inviting me into. And here's the deal. I've been too afraid to go away, to push pause on what I have been doing and take the risk to dream it up again. I want to encourage you, friend. It's worth the risk.
Created on purpose and for purpose.
Everybody, welcome back to the Daron Earlewine podcast. We got a monumental episode coming at you today, episode 160, which is kind of mind-blowing to me. We've been doing this podcast for a little bit, right? Episode 160, and thanks for downloading this episode, whether you do so on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get podcasts, or you're a YouTube subscriber and you watch it on YouTube. Appreciate you being here. And I was talking to a subscriber actually yesterday who was on Apple Podcasts, and she said, hey, there's an issue. I'm not able to find the newest episodes. And this happened to me actually with our podcast a couple years ago. And what I had to do was delete the podcast from my phone, like from the app, unsubscribe from it on Apple Music, and then resubscribe to it. And then it started to repopulate the new episodes. And I'm not sure why that happens sometimes. If any of you are having that issue, I'm sorry. Obviously, if you use Spotify, you can go out and find the episodes there, or YouTube. But if that's an issue, that has been something that has fixed it in the past. So, hey, here we're going to continue this conversation we've been having for the past couple of weeks about mission in the marketplace. But this episode is going to be a little bit different because I'm gonna call this episode "Dream It Up Again," and that'll make sense as we go forward. And I'll tell you a story that I've told you before, and then I'll tell you a story that maybe I haven't told you before. And this is going to be an episode that's going to be a necessary ending and a necessary beginning, and that'll make sense as we continue on today. So thanks so much for downloading it. Thank you guys for reaching out. Got an amazing email from a listener last week just talking about how the conversation we had with PJ Tao was so inspiring to him, and just kind of reframing his understanding of his own call to ministry, what that looks like in the marketplace that he's involved in. And it's always so encouraging to hear from you, our listeners, and what God's teaching you through the content that we're sending out. So I also want to take a minute before we jump in and just give a huge thank you to those of you that support Blackbird Mission and all the ministry that we do financially. We are a nonprofit, and we exist off of the generous donations and sacrificial giving of folks just like you. And so if you've never thought about that, I'd love you to pray about joining us. You can get information at blackbirdmission.com/give. And maybe you'd feel led to give just a one-time gift, or what helps us really know where we're at as a ministry and where we can grow in the next year is folks that join us monthly. And that doesn't have to be a huge, gift, but monthly donations help us a ton. Or if you're somebody who God has extravagantly blessed financially, you'd want to do, a sizable gift. We will manage it very responsibly and conservatively. We pride ourselves in that. But I just want to thank those folks that have made the sacrifice for years to support us and allow us to do what we do through the podcast, through Spiritual DNA, through the Purpose Paradigm in schools and local prisons with pub theology. Everything that we create here through the kind of Daron Earlewine ecosystem is made possible by the monthly partners that we have. And thank you guys so much for that. And if you haven't joined us in that way, would love for you to do so. blackbirdmission.com/give. So let's jump in. I've told you this story before. I may tell you it again because that's one of my favorite stories. Because anytime I have an excuse to talk about U2 or Bono, I'm going to do it. It's going to happen, and it needs to happen. It's a necessary thing on this podcast. And so one of my favorite Bono and U2 stories comes from December 31st, 1989. And U2 is ending the 80s, right? Brand new decade is literally hours away because this is on the 31st. And they're at Point Depot in Dublin. So they're at home because they're from Dublin, Ireland. And on the third night of their shows, Bono announced, he basically says, hey, we've had a lot of fun with these the past few months. We've had a lot of fun over the past few days playing these songs and playing these songs for you. And then he says this. He says, I was explaining to people the other night, but I might have got it a bit wrong, that it's just the end of something for you too. And that's why we're playing these concerts. And we're throwing a party for ourselves and you. It's no big deal. It's just, and this is, I love this. It's just, we have to go away and just dream it all up again. And if you follow U2 and you know their story, that's exactly what they did, right? They took some time, they paused, they went away for a little bit, and they came back with a new sound, and they came back with a new album, and it just kept, and they've done that over and over again, continued to be open and continued to be aggressive on their pursuit to just continuing to dream up the future and not be afraid to walk away from what's worked in the past, not be afraid to walk away from a sound that people would say, oh, that's U2. And they come out with something, brand new like Zoo TV, or they come out with something brand new like Pop Mart, if you follow the albums. And they weren't always massive successes, even when they took these risks, but they're dedicated to when they need to going away and just dreaming it all up again. And I love that. And I want you to just maybe spend some time after you listen to this podcast, or maybe as you're listening to it, and ask yourself an honest question, like, is there anything that I'm still doing that I maybe shouldn't still be doing because I'm afraid to dream it up again? The success I've had, the notoriety I've gained, what people think of me, the things I've accomplished, the sense of security that doing the same thing all the time has given me, has kept me from growing, has kept me from whatever breakthrough that I may need to step into, and maybe step into that God is actually inviting me into. And here's the deal. I've been too afraid to go away, to push pause on what I have been doing and take the risk to dream it up again. I want to encourage you, friend. It's worth the risk. We talked in the last episode, and I'm going to bring some of the quotes back through, but here's the deal. When we find something that becomes necessary in our life, right? Imagination and innovation is the next thing, is the direct result of that. And if you would say it is absolutely necessary that I hear from God every day, that my life is shaped and formed and brought forward with the idea that what is God saying to me and what am I going to do about it? And if I believe that God is the most creative source in the world and I'm connected to him, if I believe that the natural result of my spiritual growth with God is going to be creative expression, I'm not being artistic, I'm not talking about writing songs, we're talking about creativity. If you believe that human beings were created to create the future right alongside God, then there are times in life where we have to say, I'm going to push pause. I want to hear from God. I need to slow down what I'm doing. I need to declutter my life. I need to begin to move at the speed of relationships and at the speed of listening to God. And if I need to step away. I need to push pause, and I need to dream it up again.
A quick commercial break here on the podcast. I want to tell you a story about a conversation I had a couple of weeks ago with a faithful podcast listener like yourself. We started talking about spiritual DNA, the online course that I've created that helps you discover who you were born to be. And I said, hey, have you gone through spiritual DNA yet? And I'm assuming they listen to the podcast, like, hasn't everyone gone through spiritual DNA? They said, you know what? No, I haven't. I said, well, why not? They said, I haven't gotten around to it yet. But I really want to discover who God's created me to be. So if that's you, today's your day. Here's what you need to do. I need you to go to DaronEarlewine.com/spiritual DNA. That's where you can get the course, and I want to give you a discount because you're part of the podcast family. So once you go to buy the course, go to the promo code and use promo code podcast. You're going to get 20% off the course today, all right? That's your next step. Do it. DaronEarlewine.com/spiritual DNA. Use promo code podcast and start your journey today to discover who you were born to be. All right, let's get back to the episode.
The first time I remember telling this story was June 8th, 2008. And I don't know that I've told you guys this story before. Maybe I have. There's some of it in my book, in the episode called The Crux. And so the crux was, after the dream I had of being a drummer and being in the band died. If you didn't know, I had a book, came out last year. It's called The Death of a Dream, Resurrecting Purpose when life doesn't go as planned. That was a great promo, Daron. Anyway, you can get it on Amazon, wherever you get books online. If you haven't checked it out, I'd love for you to get a copy of it, because you probably have something in your life where life didn't go the way you thought it was, like a death of a dream of some sort. So my dream died, and then a few years after that, God invited me into starting this church. It was a young adult ministry to begin with, and then it became a full-fledged church. And we were about 8 years in, because this is June 8th, 2008. And the first Sunday we ever were a church was September 16th, I believe, 2001. So 7 years there. Yeah, 7 years. Or just over 7 years. And I got to a place, and I've talked to you guys about it, where I lost myself in trying to pastor the church. For a long time, I was, trying to be very, well, I don't know if I was even trying. Like, I felt the need that I had to be real pastoral. The details of running the church was killing me. I didn't know how to raise people up. I didn't know how to develop people. I didn't know how to delegate very well. And I was burned out, and I was in a bad place mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And at the same time, I was beginning to read a lot and understand a lot more about the wisdom and the structure that God brings us through Ephesians chapter 4, right? This passage that says, it was he who gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, and some to be pastors and teachers, to prepare God's people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure in the fullness of Christ. And back in 07, 08, I had been reading this and reading a ton of other books and trying to study. And it was the first time in my life that I realized that there was more actual roles, more vocational callings in God's kingdom than just pastors. And I never fit as a pastor. Apostle, evangelist, absolutely. But I didn't know there was a job for that. I didn't know that there was a name for that. I didn't have any idea what that was. And so over these about 2 years, I began to get to the place where I was like, I'm not a pastor. I'm an apostle, evangelist, and I don't know how to step into that calling in my current context. I just know that I don't think I can. And so on June 8th, 2008, I read that story about Bono. And on that Sunday, I resigned from this church that I had been leading for almost 8 years. And that experience had changed my life, right? My first two boys, Cole and Ty, were born during that season. The church had grown every year, doubled in size every year. We were seen as a successful church. I felt great about it. We saw people coming to Christ and baptized and being raised up to be missionaries, and just a lot of amazing people, such amazing people. It was an amazing season, and a lot of that had become a big portion of my identity. And the double whammy of this is I really felt like, okay, I need to step away. I need to resign from where I'm at. And the double whammy was I was sensing God was saying, and you need to leave the denomination that you were born into, because what God was beginning to call me into, I was beginning to get visions. We were trying to experiment with the pub theology idea. And I knew that it wasn't going to work well in that denomination. It was already not working well in the denomination. We'd gotten in trouble for what we were doing. And I was like, I don't want to have this fight over alcohol. I do sense this is from God. I feel like I need to create this. I feel like this is an apostolic evangelistic thing that we have to create it. I have to go and dream this up, but I cannot do it in the context that I'm in. And so that Sunday I got up and explained some of that. Still didn't understand exactly where I was going. I didn't know it was going to be called pub theology. I didn't know that, 3 or 4 years after that we'd have a radio show called Radio Theology. I mean, I didn't know anything about what God was doing. I just knew that it was clear to me that I had to take a break, to step away, and to dream it up again. And so I got up on stage, and at the end of the sermon, after sharing that quote, I resigned from this church that had given me so much meaning and identity and joy and pain and everything. And it was the absolutely right choice. And I wonder if there's something like that in your life right now, where you say, I found identity and I found safety and I found whatever it is in this thing, but I know in my heart and my soul that God's saying it's time for you to take a break and dream it up again. I did that in 2008. It was the best decision I ever made. And now, in not as dramatic fashion, but in a much less dramatic fashion, actually, to say the truth, I feel like I'm at that place again with this podcast and how we function with it. And so it's no big deal. Just going to take a break and dream it up again. And so this episode 160 will be the necessary ending of how we've done the podcast, and soon we'll bring something back. I don't know what it'll be. I don't know how to look. I don't know if it'll be me by myself or me with guests. I don't know if it will be a Zoom thing. I don't know if it'll be a live thing. I know that we're going to get together as a team, listen to what God wants, and we're going to dream it up again. And then we'll come back with some kind of resource that helps you be awakened to become who you were born to be. The vision, the values, those aren't changing. Just what we do with this. And so we're going to push pause. And listen, you may be back listening to like episode 120 right now. And so you may not get to episode 160 for like 2 years. And by that time, we'll have created whatever it is and it'll be back and we'll be doing it. And then you'll be like, there was no pause. Like I just caught up to 160. If you're the group of folks that listen, weekly and you're up to date, then this will be something that happens for you. And here's why this is happening for me is I feel like God's calling me to the next iteration of this apostolic and evangelistic, connecting, pioneering work. And what's interesting is in 2008, this is what I wrote. It says this: I have to go away for a while and dream it all up again. I have to pursue my role as an apostle and figure out what that means. I have to pursue creating a model of church planting that empowers other apostles to awaken the world. And I do not believe I can do that as a lead pastor of the Crux. It's interesting, in 2008, that's what I was saying, because just back in March, I was at a conference down in Florida, and it was about church planting. And I've said over and over again, I will never plant a church again. Why don't you just say never? Because you don't tell God never. But that's been a very strong, deal for me, a traditional type structure church. And as we're at this conference, I sense that God's saying, hey, Daron, this vision I'm giving you for the marketplace, to step into the marketplace and take the content you've been using and begin developing people to become who they were born to be. Schools, prisons, companies, still in churches, but outside the walls of the church, like we've always been with Blackbird, with radio theology, with pub theology. We've always been outside the walls of the church. But what God, I feel like, was saying is like, I want you to try to figure out, how do you start planting like micro churches in the marketplace? And then to see this, that in 2008, I was trying to figure out how to create a model of church planting that empowers other apostles to awaken the world. And I'm back at the same place. Because I believe there are rogue leaders, rogues, pioneers, entrepreneurs that are rogue bees. They're not rebels. And God has equipped them and uniquely created them to create the future. And what I want to do is I want to find those leaders. I want to pull them into a collective, right? We're launching a brand new for-profit venture that will be under the umbrella of Daron Earlewine, LLC, called the Rogue Collective. And I've talked to you guys about rogue bees before. There's a chapter in the book about being a rogue bee. But I want to find these leaders. I want to put them into groups. I want to create a collective, a community of them, and then raise them up to create the future that's on God's heart. And I think that's going to look like people development and discipleship, because that's what the movement of Jesus always is. And I don't know what it's going to look like. I got some ideas. I'm putting it together. But over this summer, I'm going to take a break. Starting the second week of June, I'm going to take an 8-week sabbatical. And I've not talked about that a ton. Never taken a sabbatical in 24 years of ministry. I'm going to take 8 weeks. The first 4, I'm just shutting it down. Second 4, I'm going to be doing a lot of research and connecting with resources and with people to learn a lot more about what this is going to look like. And when we figure that out, you guys will be the first to know. I understand a lot of it. There's going to be some traveling, doing some keynote speaking at companies. There's going to be a lot of development one-on-one and groups that we're going to be put together that will be in person, also virtually. So the scaffolding of it makes sense to me. But I got to get some time to dream it up again and really hear from God what it is that he's asking me to do and how we go after that. And I'm fired up about it. I'm not scared about it because I can look back from 2008 and then even before that to these multiple times when I know that God is nudging me, and I just got to slow down enough to hear from him. God, what are you telling me to do? What am I going to do about it? Dream it up again and go do it. So that's where we're at. That's what we're going to do. And here's the deal. I said this in the last episode, and I want you to marinate on this, is once obeying God and fulfilling your role within the Great Commission becomes necessary for your existence. When you say, this is essential to me, and that's not something you can just say mentally, right? That's not just a mental assent. Yeah, that's important. No, when it's like breathing, right? Like, this is the essential, necessary thing I do is obey God and do what he's told me to do and step into the Great Commission. Here's the deal. Necessity is the mother of all innovation, as Plato said. And when it becomes necessary, you will be willing to dream it up again and try something different in your life. And I'm going to be here encouraging you to do that, praying for you to do that, leading by example in how we do that. And I am so stoked for those of you rogue leaders that will decide to join me on that process. And there's a pretty amazing future, I think, that's right now on God's heart and God's mind that we're going to get a chance to experience and get a chance to create. So if you have questions, you have thoughts, I'd love for you to reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you about it. I'd love to get a cup of coffee and talk about it. Maybe jump on a Zoom if you're not in the Midwest areas. But I ask you to be praying for us. This summer is going to be interesting. Like I said, I'm taking the 8-week sabbatical. Never done that. That part I'm kind of freaked out about. So be praying for us over this summer, and reach out to us. I'd love to talk with you after those first 4 weeks of disappearing for a little bit are past, and just ask that I would just continue to hear clearly from God what it is he wants us to create, and that it would just continue to see his kingdom come and his will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And it's an absolute joy and honor to be able to live this life and to have you along with me in the process. So it's not a big deal. It's just I got to go away and dream it all up again. And when I do, we'll be back with episode 161 of the podcast or something totally different. Until that time, I want you to never forget these 3 nuggets of really good news. God is for you. He's not against you. God is near you. He is not far away, and he has created you on purpose and for purpose. Have an awesome day. Appreciate it. Love you guys. Thanks for downloading this episode of the Daron Earlewine podcast.